Like Gus, I fall asleep when I talk, and it's so embarrassing. After two magisterial presentations, I don't know what there's left to say, so we'll just open up for Q&A. This is an amazing event, and for an organization like the League to survive for 25 years, that is a huge accomplishment. So congratulations to all of you, particularly Dana, for extraordinary leadership. This really is quite amazing. It's a real honor to be here with you and with all of you. Many of you are mentors of mine, and certainly my two fellow panelists are in my category of heroes. I've got to be, honesty requires that I express a beef about Dana, however. About 15 years ago, I was here, and he wanted to show me some longleaf pine forest. So we went out in the longleaf pine forest, and I made the mistake of saying something about biodiversity here, and it was less than elsewhere, and he assured me, no, it's more here than elsewhere. And then for proof, he had me get down on my hands and knees. Now this is a longleaf pine forest. There's palmetto scrub and all kind of things there, including the famous saber-toothed chigger. So I've had South Carolina under my skin for 15 years. Thank you, Dana. We were supposed to talk about the big forces, and so let me see if this works. Yeah, there it is. Carbon dioxide in the atmosphere is measured at Mauna Loa last week, or the week before, hit 399 parts per million. Now, all of you know, and if you don't know, you should know, that if you extend the line back 640 to 800,000 years, over here on the left-hand side, it never goes above 280 parts per million. And then if you ask, following Gus's talk, if you ask what plan there is to stop it before, let's say, 450 parts per million or 500 or 560, the doubling point, there is none. We are living with the pedal to the metal. There is good news in this, but the problem is this remorseless working of big numbers. They don't care whether Republican or Democrat or low country or high country. They don't care. They just work. And so this is where we're headed. So I once had this curve on a slide. It had McDonald's M and a Coke swoosh and a Nike check and so forth. And I said to the audience that one of those will kill you. And somebody shouted back, says, no, 3 of them will kill you. But of those numbers and those curves, this is the most important big number we face. And there is a limit here. We don't know where the break point is. This is the kind of the other slide I want to put on here, the big numbers. This is not something that is solvable in the way we think of solving problems. David Archer is an atmospheric physicist, and he points out here what most people know, I think, certainly in this room, is once you put carbon in the atmosphere, it stays there for a long time. And so this isn't a quickly solvable kind of issue. So we don't have something that a 10-year program would fix. We now have entered that awkward phrase that's been mentioned twice this morning, the Anthropocene. It just means we're in the driver's seat. So then I think we have to start asking the questions about how did we get here? And Gus's great talk on the politics of this, Lord Stern described climate change as the largest market failure in history, but long before it was a market failure, it was the largest political failure in history. The first warning to a U.S. president about climate change was given in 1965 to Lyndon Johnson, and we still have no de jure policy. So as you look at the future of the League and this part of the country, and virtually every part of the country under about 100 feet elevation, you're in a crosshairs of all of this, and it is in every way a political issue. And so the question I'd like to raise is, what do we do about it? And as part of the personal story here, in 2008, I was living in London, and wrote a little book called Down to the Wire, Confronting Climate Collapse. And that was my 35,000-foot meditation on what it means for us to live in this particular world at this time. And if you're biblical about this, it means we're evicting ourselves from the only paradise humans have ever known. And geologists call that the Holocene. And so we are removing ourselves from the 10,000 or 12,000 year set of conditions that gave rise to everything that we are. That's our poetry, our literature, our art, our history, our highs, our lows, our goods, and our bads. It was all formed in that era. And so at the about 15,000-foot level, Gus and I, and several of you in the room, worked on a climate action plan for the next U.S. president in 2008. And that went where all of us know it went. And so for me, the personal story was, I think, the same as for all of you. What do I do in this place, given where I am at this time? And so for me, living in Oberlin, Ohio, Rust Belt city, 35 miles from Cleveland, on a straight line across Lake Erie, about 84 miles from Detroit. Youngstown's off to the east, Toledo's off to the west, Rust Belt country. And so what do I do is very largely tied up in questions that you all are facing here about what to do. So we launched several years ago the Oberlin Project. And the Oberlin Project, which I'll explain, is an attempt to bring all the elements of sustainability together in a way that the parts reinforce the larger whole. Now, if you think about what we've done in the movement, typically what we have done, and I think almost exclusively, is to focus on single issues. So we do energy efficiency, and then we do water, and then we do land use, and then we do green building, but never in a way that we do it as a package in the system. So what we're trying to do is to do this as a system, and I think it is, the phrase full spectrum sustainability is one way to describe it. It just means you're going to have lunch with lots of different kinds of folks, and you're going to have to learn to cross discipline boundaries. There's a story that I think illustrates the point here, and it is this. There's a little girl, all of you have heard this before, but a little girl drawing a picture. And her mother comes by and says, well, honey, what are you drawing? And she says, well, I'm drawing a picture of God. And her mama looks at her and says, well, honey, nobody knows what God looks like. And the little girl looks up at her mom imperiously and says, well, they will now. That's what we're trying to do. We're visual creatures and begin to see this world ahead. I think Stephen is right. We're not going to think our way into the world. We're going to live our way into the world. And so the issue is, how do we build sustainability? And do that in a way that becomes the default setting for where we are and how we live. So this is a picture of our downtown. We're a little town of about 10,000 people, a college town, and we're linked with the Civil War also. It was said that Oberlin was the town that started the Civil War because of what was called the Wellington Rescue and so forth. And so we're linked, our histories are joined in at least that way. We've got a poverty level of about 28%. 52% of the kids in the city schools are on free and reduced lunch program. These are the goals that we have put together. Let me just put all of them on the screen here. So the first goal is simply to build, take the college property in the downtown and take a block, design it at the LEED platinum level for neighborhood development, and then use that as the economic driver in the community. That's goal number one. Can we build a sustainable economy? So what's it look like? And as the anchor institution in the region or in the town, the college is the driver here. But can we build in a way that creates a force for sustainable economic development? So what does that sustainable economy look like? The second goal, and we're part of the Clinton Climate Initiative. We're one of 3 sites in the United States and one of 18 worldwide that are designated climate positive. We've been rolled into the C40 cities. Obviously, we're the little kid on the block. But the goal is to get to a carbon neutral economy and do that by the year 2025 or 2030. We are, as Dana mentioned, coal-fired. I mean, most of Ohio is. The third goal is to begin to rebuild a local food system in the same way that you're doing it here. Ohio once had about 250,000 farms. We're now down to about 65,000, most of which are in the corn soybean business. So can we grow 70% of our own food within the local area and take advantage of the new market for local foods? The fourth goal, in the same way that we did the Adam Joseph Lewis Center 15 years ago, is to use this as an educational venture, and that's education, capital E, in the way that David Shai, former President Furman, would understand. But can we use this as a driver for local understanding? So we brought together Votech School, the college, the public schools, and a two-year college in a consortium around education. So what do young people need to know to live well and appropriately and constructively in this particular era, the Anthropocene? So we've got a consortium of people around that. The final goal is to figure out how to move this beyond Oberlin. If we succeed in making this little town of 10 and soon to be maybe 15 or 20,000 people, if we succeed in making this really cool little bubble of carbon neutrality, will have failed. So this has got to go viral beyond this, and I'll say a word about that in just a moment. So this is where we've started. This is how we've organized the community. The phrase at the top of the slide here, the full spectrum sustainability, it just means, can we begin to do the public business around food, energy, water, the flow of low entropy? I mean, how we provision ourselves with food, energy, water, shelter, healthcare, livelihood, and so forth. Can we do that in a way that the parts reinforce the whole thing? And that's the challenge. That's not how we've organized the world. That's not how my curriculum at Oberlin is organized, or that of most any other college or university. We think in specializations. And again, to quote Aldo Leopold, Leopold said something like to the effect that the challenge of the coming era was to think at right angles to specialization. It doesn't rule out specialization, it just means you have to walk intellectually on two legs, not one. So this is how we've organized the community. We actually have 9 public teams. I couldn't figure out how to get 9 balls on that slide in a way that was even remotely legible. So we've organized about 250 people around the community into these teams. And the full spectrum part means the dialogue across those teams. So if you want to start a local food organization, you better be talking to the educational community, because that's not the kind of skill set that kids have when they leave schools. You better talk to bankers and the finance community, because farming is expensive. If they go into agriculture, they've got to have, in Ohio, startup funding of $500,000 to $1 million. Then you better have an economic development person there, because the marketing is really critical. So to do one thing, you've got 4 teams at the table, full spectrum sustainability. So this is the organization. One of the things we did, and this is not on the slide, but we passed out copies of Donella Meadows' great article, Places to Intervene in the System. And she has, all of you are probably familiar with that or have heard of Donella Meadows. You can Google Dana Meadows and leverage points, and that article comes up. And the issue for us was, how do you intervene in this particular system called Oberlin at this particular time to change the system? And so we wanted to start a dialogue, not that we knew or that we thought that she knew in some kind of scriptural sense how to make changes, but rather to start a dialogue of where do we intervene in this little system called Oberlin? How do we begin to move this thing towards sustainability? So sustainability does in fact become the default setting. This is the current project. We've spent about $60 million so far to move the city. About every dollar of philanthropy has leveraged another 5.75 of investment or new market tax credits. This is a hotel that we'll break ground on this summer. It's part of that downtown driver, that first goal. How do we begin to rebuild the downtown, power it by sunshine? So this will be the first solar-powered hotel, I think, in the world. It'll be zero discharge. So bathrooms are in another building someplace across the street. This is the cornerstone of a block that includes a very famous art museum that is third behind art museums at Harvard and Yale, Performing Arts Center. So one of the issues here, can you use the hotel in performing arts and art as part of a larger conversation? My granddaughter assures me that I'm boring. She's 11, and she's no longer in my will. So that, but now think about this. The conversation we have typically about these sorts of things is about parts per million and feet and numbers and policy issues. And so it leaves out the part of the mind that is art and poetry and music and serendipity and all these other human qualities that also emerge in the Holocene. So we want to begin to widen the conversation about sustainability, so it isn't just about gloom and doom and woe is us. It's about great performance and great food. Oh, by the way, it was grown locally in a hotel, and the whole block is powered by sunshine and so forth. Let me wrap up here with these are the things we've done to date. We've so far, I mentioned, spent about $60 million toward probably what is a $300 million roughly investment package in the region. Our energy supply, and it seems so hard to think about this at the outset, but the energy supply for the city by the end of the year, this year, will be about 95% carbon free. And these things appear like climbing a mountain. I can't climb the mountain because there's a mountain in front of me. It seems so hard to do it until you've done it and begin to look into this, and it's much easier. And one of the things that's working for us now is technology. We deployed a 3 megawatt solar array this last fall. But these are the things that we've done. We've got a whole list of things we're aiming to do. We see ourselves as catalytic, not permanent, with a lifespan of maybe 4 to 6 years. Then a couple of final thoughts. What is this? Well, it depends on where you are. If you take a beam of light and refract it through a crystal, it breaks in a different bandwidth. So from a perspective of a young student coming into Oberlin, it's a cool 24/7 downtown. But from a local business person's perspective, we think we can double or triple the dollar volume and do it sustainably. So developing a local foods economy and local energy systems and so forth. For Sherrod Brown in the U.S. Senate, that Karl Rove spent $25 million to try to beat last year and failed. You're all supposed to cheer when I said that. The project looks like an economic development model in the Rust Belt region. And then the last item here, which I think is really important, is all of this is national security. There is a debate that has broken out, probably began 15 or 20 years ago, but people in the Pentagon who are in charge of our security know now that security doesn't start at shores and borders and work out. It also includes what happens inside our shores and borders. So it's how you organize the banking system and the energy grid and the food supply system and so forth. And we know that we are under considerable threat. So this resonates with, this is not a right or left issue. This simply says that this is now sustainable development. It isn't just a good thing to do. It isn't just an environmental thing to do. It isn't just a liberal thing to do. It is a necessary thing to do if we're to have a secure future. And then two last thoughts here. To take this viral and make this go well beyond Oberlin, because again, if we simply stop at making this a really cool, sustainable little village out in rural Ohio, we'll have failed. The idea is to take this to the next level. So taking this little bench lab experiment of Oberlin up to the next level, and so we're now working with what we're calling the Lake Erie Crescent. And it starts at the north end. These are 5 Rust Belt cities that are coming together with foundations and universities involved as the conveners and drivers of it, talking to major investment pools to begin to say, can we do full spectrum sustainability in the old Rust Belt region? So Flint, Michigan, where the mayor told me that their tax base shrinks 20% per year. That's a city in free fall. It's no better in Youngstown, or pardon me, well, no better in Youngstown, but Detroit is kind of the national picture child as a basket case. So can we begin to do sustainable development? We're focused on 3 things: smart growth, which is urban redevelopment, renewable energy, and sustainable agriculture. And again, doing those so that anything done in those areas spills into the other areas. So one last thought here, and it's simply this, taken from Martin Luther King. Gus mentioned Bobby Kennedy's speech in 1968. This was a speech given a year before by Martin Luther King. And the sense of urgency, this is the famous talk he gave called The Fierce Urgency of Now. If you haven't read it, read it. But time is unforgiving. And I started with a slide of the Keeling curve. Those remorseless numbers are also unforgiving. And if we were to turn this into a success story, it will not be quick. And your work here has to have patience and stamina, as well as the creativity and ingenuity that Stephen mentioned. You've got all of that. But time is not our friend here. Time is very, very short. So the question that hangs over us at this point, I think, is whether we have the wherewithal to create our version of the, call it a Tea Party movement, for lack of a better phrase, and this time powered by science and powered by sunshine. And I think you can do it. And thank you all for all the great work that you've done here.